Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families. A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir, science fiction and picture book author, reader of all of those genres, just about, your founder and co-host, coming to you today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country for episode 120.
My goodness.
Welcome to my co-host.
Thank you. Oh, well, and I am Laurie Bell, science fiction and fantasy author, blogger, reader, prompter, 100-word fiction, Friday fictioneer, writer, flash fiction. It's all bits and pieces. So, and your co-host today. Yes, it is a bit of everything, and yet sometimes it feels like it's nothing. And also coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
In episode 6 score.
Yes. My goodness.
Yes.
Here we are.
Because the score is 20. I don't know where that came from, but
I
there
think
you go.
This is 16 for me.
16. Episode
Goodness
16.
Oh, there you go.
So you're almost into adult.
Oh, that would explain the moodiness. It makes perfect sense now.
Oh, no, we've decided, as we did decide before we press record, that in fact the full moon, and it's one of the last big harvest moons, what do you call it? Harvest moons of the year. So yes. And I had a couple of texts from my daughter, the eldest, who does love watching the moon. She can see it out her window, and she said, "Mum, get outside, moon, go look." I was like, have a look at. Oh, it's great.
It was pretty. It's been a good one this month and last month. We could see it. It's usually too cloudy, mind you. With the storms we've been having lately, it's a bit hard. We had a lightning strike very close to us the other night, and it was really loud. Scared the cats. Scared me. So it was really close and very, very bright. So that was fun times. It's all sorts of fun times at the moment with the weather in Melbourne.
Tumultuous. We do have a fairly volatile autumn, which is lovely. Yeah. Okay.
It'd be nice if it was a fraction warmer though.
Yes, it would be.
I'm sick of taking my coat and my scarf to work.
Everything. I tried yesterday, no scarf around the neck, but it was just too cold, so I had to go and find another scarf. But anyway, we are in tadpole season, of course, according to the Wurrung, the Kulin Nation calendar down here in southeast Victoria. So tadpole season it is.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. And I'm trying to think what the Wurrung name is, and it's completely slipped my mind. Apologies, but anyway, I do know it's tadpole season.
It'll come back to you just as you're thinking on something else.
But it makes so much more sense, the Indigenous calendar, because as opposed to 4 seasons that the Northern Hemisphere, and they just reverse it down here, it just doesn't make any sense, because it's more than 4, and we definitely don't fit with timeline as opposed to when the wattle comes out, or when the tadpoles are out, or when the wombats are on the prowl, etc. Anyway, there you go. So here we are, 120, and talking about land, I have a fabulous chat with Vanessa Lee, who wrote High Tide, an Australian who's now living overseas in Germany, but fantastic, talk about the Shire up there in New South Wales and climate change and climate fiction and all those kind of things. And I did go down a little bit of speaking of the weather, down a little bit of a rabbit hole, looking at the origin of cli-fi, which in fact it was an obvious analogy to sci-fi, although a lot of climate fiction authors don't necessarily see themselves as science fiction authors, but more as a speculative fiction.
Which is fascinating to me,
Yeah.
given the history of science fiction, and that there's always been a lot of weather-driven, whether it's different planetary weather, whether it's different worldly, different alternate realities, that quite often brings up that what if.
Yes, because that is science fiction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What if?
Yeah. What if?
Yeah.
So what if the seas did rise? What if
Yep.
the bushfires burned everything? So many so it's interesting to me that the sci-fi fiction writers maybe don't see the sci-fi connections, whereas sci-fi, we've been doing it for a long time in the sense of weather, like your June, for example, with dry worlds and all that sort of thing. So it's interesting. I love it. It's great talk. It was really great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So, in fact, speculative fiction about climate change, the term appeared and became fashionable outside of science fiction circles in the early 21st century by journalist Dan Bloom, who claims that he coined it in 2007. And Margaret Atwood, of course, was an early adopter, you know, Oryx and Crack and all of those ones, which, amazing, interesting stories. As with the use of counterfactual in place of alternative history, there tends to be an associated distancing from the perceived downmarket nature or pulp groups of genre science fiction, bringing this area of speculation within the comfort zone of mainstream writers of science fiction. Hence the symptomatic newspaper headline, "Don't call it science fiction, cli-fi is literary fiction." So,
which is interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. So that was in 2013. But despite puffs of this calibre, any assumption that the use of the term might usefully separate sheep from goats has seemed increasingly precarious. Thus says the Science Fiction Encyclopedia, which I did have a bit of a look up. So that was interesting. But
that's interesting. And like you say, speculative fiction definitely fits in with that, because it is asking the what if. What if this happened in 50 years? And
that's it.
It might be on the assumption that it probably will, but but that still falls into speculation, I think.
I think it's time for some news.
Interesting response that's come out of the I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that there was a digital draft to digital AI survey that was going out to all of their clients,
which I filled in.
Their response actually came back where they've actually announced their stance, and thank goodness they actually listened to everyone. So their stance that's come out in email, if anyone's got that this week, and it also came out on social media, their stance is, until we see significant reforms, especially around greater contractual protections and transparency governing use, intellectual property protections and rights restrictions, Draft to Digital will not offer AI rights licensing opportunities.
Which I think is fantastic.
That was a great outcome of that survey. And it just shows the power of sending that sort of a survey out, and that they listen to it.
Listen to their clients. Which
is really good to hear. I can't see how they could have come to any other conclusion, to be honest.
No, it would have been
really.
It would have been dodgy, I think, if it hadn't been.
Canberra Writers Festival, the program's been announced. So the Writers Festival is being held on the 23rd to 27th of October, featuring over 100 guests. So that one's happening in Canberra, and there's also Perth Festival has announced a new literature festival, which is kind of exciting. So that's not going to happen until spring 2026 though, but that's cool. We love a good writers festival. So
definitely love a good writers festival.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of all the big things that I had on my list, really. What have you got?
But I did want to mention a little bit of a reminder about Book Fair Australia, which is up in Sydney. And that's the 2nd of November to the 3rd of November, and that's at the showgrounds. And I do wish that I was up in Sydney at that time, because it looks like it's going to be fantastic. So, just over 40 days to the event, and there's exhibitors and books of all genres. There's people and chats and panels and all sorts of things. So jump onto bookfairaustralia.com and have a look at that. That looks absolutely wonderful.
Very cool.
And I don't always do acquisitions, but you know,
Mhm.
one of our favourite authors, Eugene Bacon, I just had to
Yes.
mention that Stars and Sabres have bagged the gorgeous novella from Eugene called now this is, excuse me, Eugene, if I don't pronounce this correctly, Naga Fandile Whisper, the Naga Fandile Whisperer. A novella that she's written, that they've written. Publishers Jendia Gammon and Gareth L. Powell acquired the world English rights from the author following an exclusive submission. It's going to be released September 2025. And the interesting thing is, as we know, the novella is part of the Sauti collective and Afrocentric universe that's rooted in African mythologies, languages, and cultures. So another fantastic influence on the Australian writing community.
And what I love about the publisher is they're a brand new publisher. They've only started producing work in this last couple of months. I've been following both of the co-creators online for a very long time now. They're both fantastic sci-fi writers, but it is a publishing house by writers, so they know what writers go through. They know the process. They know the stresses and crazies that we all go through as writers. And it's a very sci-fi, fantasy, strong, small indie
fantasy, horror,
publishing house that they're really starting to kick into gears. So fantastic, good work for them.
So their little byline is To the Stars Through Stories, which is Ad Astra per Fabulous. I mean, how good is that?
I know.
So yeah, very, very happy the Eugene, she sought to craft this novella to satiate her curiosity about Naga Fandele, creatures of unreality in the Sauti verse. And she wanted to write, of course, a strong female protagonist into a Sauti story, and found this in Chantal, a young guardian with an affinity to hive-minded beasts, unaware that she has more sound magic than she knows how to use. She's stoked and I am stoked and honoured to entrust Ngafandele Whisperer to Jendia Gammon and Gareth Powell, the power couple behind the Stars and Sabres. So we absolutely look forward to getting that one out and keeping an eye on this fabulous looking publisher.
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right. Now,
and I did want to mention, so Helen Edwards, another friend of the show, her second novel was coming out on the 2nd of October, so it's only really creeping up very fast. So by Riveted Press, so that's The Legend of the Lighthouse Moon.
Yes.
And also a reminder that Raken's Fall by Nikki Lee, that's coming out on 16th of October. And actually it does put me in mind and remind me of the importance of pre-sales with local authors and with indie authors. So if you are a big supporter of any of our fabulous authors on the website and online, do support them with pre-orders. It is really helpful with just keeping the works going and getting a series to continue. So it's a massive help.
Writers SA have a nice collection of the opportunities and competitions. So the 7th of October is when the 2025 Peter Porter Poetry Prize closes. I thought that was quite a nice.
There is a mouthful.
But that's kind of perfect for poetry. Yeah, so the Australian Book Review welcomes entries for the 21st Peter Porter Poetry Prize, which is open to all international poets from the 1st of July 2024 until midnight the 7th of October. First prize is $6,000 and entries must be an original single-authored poem of not more than 60 lines written in English. And 5 shortlisted poems will be published in their January-February issue, which is fantastic. The October Not Quite Right Prize for Flash Fiction. I thought you might like this one as the old Friday Flash Fiction.
Yes.
So this closes on the 20th of October, so you've got some time. And this is calling writers of all ages and levels of ability to create an original piece of flash fiction of 500 words or less based on 2 typical writing prompts plus 1 anti-prompt. So compete for 2,000 in cash prizes, including 1,000 for the winner, cash prizes for the entire shortlist, and 2 wildcard prizes. So winners are allowed on the Not Quite Right podcast, where the judges share in-depth analysis about the entries and offer free writing advice. And you can see that. So the podcast about their conversations about media culture and the art of writing, hosted by Ed and Amanda, explores the intricacies of fiction writing, media and current events from a writer's perspective. So I thought, I have to tell you that one because that's there.
I'll have to jump onto that.
And I've just got a couple of anthologies, and I thought this was worth just sharing these because it is, kind of interesting. So there's an anthology photography competition. So any of our readers and writers who are also photographers, closes on the 30th of October, and it's open to photographers working at any levels. The anthology photography competition celebrates outstanding standalone images. It also provides a platform for photographers to showcase their work through publication. Images submitted must be on the theme of everyday wonders, and submissions will be judged on quality, creativity, and visual emotional impact. And in fact, it says here that the winner will receive a £500 cash prize. So,
hello, Aussie writers.
Exactly.
Hopefully they take international submissions.
And an anthology travel writing competition, which again, something a little bit different. If you're a travel writer, this one's for you. Established for writers who like to share authentic travel experiences and to provide a platform for public publication. The anthology travel writing competition is open to original and previously unpublished travel articles in the English language by writers of any nationality living anywhere in the world. They're looking for an engaging article that captures the reader's attention, conveying a strong sense of the destination and the local culture. And again, the first prize is 500. Now, actually, that's euro. That's not pounds. That's euro. Looking at
that's
the symbol.
Still good for Aussies.
Still good for Aussies. So please have a look. And if you're thinking, what's my writing doing? I can't survive on my writing, which we know that we can't. We all have to have jobs. But these little trickles. But I expect an entry, please, Laurie, on October
I will
Not
have to
Quite Right.
put that together. I'll have to have a look at the prompts and see what happens.
Yes, indeed. All right. Last one that I wanted to share is a really important reminder for all Australian authors is to make sure that you do a legal deposit of your story with the National Library of Australia. So if you go to nla.gov.au and you can / using library / services. But anyway, go to the nla.gov.au and the National Library collects Australian stories, ensuring that your story is preserved for future generations through a legal deposit. That means that it's there forever, for as long as the world lasts, we don't get a dystopian Armageddon in the future. Anyway, we'll wait till we talk to Vanessa later. But your publication will help researchers, scholars and audiences everywhere to understand the Australian experience. So legal deposit collections form a diverse and inclusive picture of the nation and capture what we are thinking, imagining and writing about over time. And that just gives the back of my neck prickles. I think, that's just so fantastic. So there are currently over 10 million items in the national collection, and we want Australia's publishers to help us to continue to build a comprehensive resource for all Australians to enjoy. And of course, deposited publications reach a large national and global audience through discovery services such as Trove. So
and it is actually a requirement, which is not well known, which you would think would be more well known, but it's actually a requirement by the government to actually submit your book into legal deposit. And they now take digital books as well, so you can send them the digital copy rather than posting a hard copy. So
which is fantastic. And it also means that schools can then request your book to put into their libraries if you've got that ISBN and it's in the National Library, which is wonderful.
And a shout out to all the schools out there who are actually ordering books, particularly indie books, which I don't think happens all that often, but it is a massive help for authors when schools get involved and they promote your stuff as well. So yay to schools and yay to librarians, because you are the best.
Suck out the rest.
Yep.
All right, so that is all my news. I did have a bit more because I did have a little more time to prepare for this episode, but I think I'll leave that till next time. I think that's a lot of news.
I think so. Lots going on.
All right. And just before we slide into the next little thing, which is, of course, our fabulous book spotlights, I've got some John Koenig words to share with you.
Oh, go. I've been dying for some new words. Yep, go for it.
So John Koenig, Koenig, the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, as you know, is one of my favourite books. And thinking about our who we're talking to today, well, I've got my little tags here on the right page. I thought that it was kind of interesting because I had been doing so much rabbit holing.
Love it.
Ecsis, ecsis, and I think I'm not sure if I've shared this one before, but it's a noun and it describes the haunting sense of mystery infused into certain random details that beckons you to wonder how it ended up here at this point in time, marveling at a patch of white on a dog's chest, a bubble trapped in an old window, a glimpse of Saturn's rings shivering in a telescope lens, knowing that behind the thing itself is a long chain of causes and effects that veers off into the shadows of prehistory, anchored somewhere near the dawn of time, even though the end result is somehow right there in front of you, shimmering in place.
Love that. What a great word.
Ecsis, isn't that fantastic?
Ecsis.
And it's from the Indonesian ecsis, to exist, to be.
Well, there you go.
And I
I like that one.
Yeah.
That's great for all speculative fiction writers and science fiction writers. Is like that. How did that happen? And then getting lost in that rabbit hole of finding out.
And it kind of does it support the thought of the multiverses with every decision another, potential universe?
I'll take it.
Yeah, heels up. Yeah, anyway, so that was good.
Yep.
All right, and the other one, no, that was the blue tag. So the blue tag is, this is tricky. Craxis. Also, this was good for Vanessa's book. The unease of knowing how quickly your circumstances could change on you. That no matter how carefully you shape your life into what you want it to be, the whole thing could be overturned in an instant with little more than a single word, a single step, a phone call out of the blue. And by the end of next week, you might already be looking back on this morning as if it were a million years ago, a poignant last hurrah of normal life.
Craxis. I'm writing that down just because I think I have that paranoia. That's
Right.
like a paranoia that I have in the back of my mind that it just something could happen, like you break a leg or you have a stroke or something that it just suddenly changes everything. It's not something that you plan for, not something that you're prepared for, and just
global
everything
pandemic.
changes.
Let's just go global pandemic.
Yep. So that explains. Now I have a word for that.
You have a word. Craxis. I
have a word for that feeling.
So craxis and ecsis, the haunting sense of mystery and the sense of unease, knowing your circumstances could change. Well, perhaps we'll just leave it at that because I just love these words. And thanks, John. And if you please buy his book, which is lovely. Look at his YouTube channel, which he sometimes puts together a little montage of some of the longer words. So I don't usually read the longer ones because they're usually a couple of pages. But they're really lovely. And you go, I can see how that works.
Yep. I now have a word for my crazy. Okay. Moving on.
It is time for some book spotlights. And our book spotlights today, I would just like to share a warning for some of our Aboriginal listeners that today we do speak about some names of people who have passed. So if you want to skip ahead for this, please feel free to do that if that is important to you. Because we are sharing 4 of the books from Wilderness Australia's Karajia Environment Awards. So these are some of the shortlisted books, and we did chat with the lovely Victor and Isabel a few episodes ago, which was fantastic. And the awards we think are announced next week. They're coming up, so this will come out just before the awards. I think if I can get my act together and get this done this weekend. But we also do want to please pardon us if our pronunciation of some of the First Nation words is a little bit incorrect. We will do our best, and feel free to send us a text and happy to take correction. So first bird is Gurril, Stormbird by Trevor Fourmile and illustrated by Jingalu, and it is, of course, an educational picture book. It's based on a traditional story from the Gimaway Wallabara Yidinji First Nations people of Cairns and has been told by many generations. So Gurril could not understand why everyone was afraid of a snake, even if it was Guju Guju, the rainbow serpent. But he was soon to discover just how powerful Guju Guju really was and why it is not a good idea to torment the rainbow serpent. So Gurril, Stormbird, is a Gimaway Wallabara, Gimawa, pronounce Gimoywalabara, Gimoywalabara, Yidinji traditional story that helps to explain the cultural beliefs held by the Djinji First Nations people of Cairns. The Gimawalabara are the traditional custodians of Cairns and the surrounding regions. The story has been told orally by many generations over thousands of years and is intrinsic to the Djinji culture, both past and present. The call of the Stormbird helps the Yidinji people prepare for the arrival of rain or the wet season. And during the dry season, Gimoiwa Labara people would dance and mimic the Stormbird to bring in the rain. And we've just been talking about the Wairarang seasons down here. All right. So
it's very fitting.
There we go. Yes. Stormbird. It is for this time of year, isn't it?
Absolutely. So author Trevor Fourmile is a Yimui Wallabawa Yidinji people of Cairns area in the far north Queensland. He's an author of numerous children's books, including How the Cassowary Got His Helmet, which is a great book. These stories are based on the coastal rainforests and told in the traditional style. Trevor's Yidinji name is Boomy, which means lightning flash. He's passionate about teaching the younger generation his culture through traditional dancing, storytelling, painting, and writing children's books. Gosh, storytelling is so important, isn't it?
Mm.
Illustrator Jingalu is a Bagawa woman from Gumbagia and Yaegul country. She grew up in Coffs Harbour in the mid-north coast of New South Wales and travelled around Australia with her art career as a young adult before returning home to raise her family. Jingalu has been painting since the age of 16 and creates to share stories and important messages about culture.
Beautiful. All right. Book number 2 is The Trees by Victor Steffensen, illustrated by Sandra Steffensen. And as we mentioned, we talked to Victor a few episodes ago.
Yeah, that was great.
So the blurb is, take a walk with Uncle Koo in the trees, a picture book about caring for country and respect for Indigenous knowledge. Looking after the trees is important for keeping country happy and healthy. First Nation peoples have cared for the trees on country for thousands of years. In return, the trees look after the people and provide them with gifts of seeds, flowers, wood, and more. This creates the balance between giving and taking from the land. Featuring stunning artwork by Sandra Steffensen, The Trees is a powerful and timely story to help future generations manage their landscapes and ensure that they thrive. At the back of the book, you will find lyrics to a song written by author Victor Steffensen with the title We Are the Trees and a QR code to watch the song's YouTube video. And the book is the follow-up to Victor Steffensen's Looking After Country with Fire, which explains Aboriginal burning practices for children. And as we know, Victor owned up that parents have told him that song becomes an earworm when kids want to listen to it over and over again on trips in the car. And so
that's fantastic. I know, that's fantastic. And the illustrations are absolutely stunning in that one. Yes. I really love that one. So author Victor Steffensen is an Indigenous writer, filmmaker, musician and consultant. He is a descendant of the Tagalaka people through his mother's connections from the Gulf country of North Queensland. Much of Victor's work over the past 27 years has been based on the arts and reviving traditional knowledge values, particularly traditional burning, through mentoring and leadership, as well as on-ground training with Aboriginal communities and many non-Indigenous Australians. He is a co-founder of Firesticks, an Indigenous-led organisation that aims to reinvigorate the use of cultural burning. Victor's first book, Fire Country, was published in 2020 in the wake of Australia's worst bushfires and has sold over 13,000 copies since its release. Following its success, Victor wrote a picture book, Looking After Country with Fire, which came out in 2022. And that might actually be a really important thing that's coming up this summer, because they're saying that this summer might be a really bad one for bushfires in Australia again, particularly after all the rain that we've had. So anyway, illustrator Sandra Steffensen grew up in the small tropical rainforest village of Karanda. And after moving to Sydney and living there for 15 years, Sandra moved back to North Queensland 13 years ago, lured by her childhood memories and connections to the local landscape. Her maternal grandmother is from Tagalaka people from the Gulf country of North Queensland. Sandra teaches visual arts, specialising in the practice of ceramics. She uses the segraffito technique to adorn her functional pieces with intricate illustrations of local landscapes and the wildlife inhabiting them, to remind us of the beauty and the role they play in this world. In 2022, Sandra illustrated Looking After Country with Fire, written by Victor Steffensen. And yes, as I said, the illustrations are absolutely stunning.
Beautiful. And again, just a warning that we are going to mention the name of somebody who has passed. So book 3, Gurawul the Whale by Uncle Max Dulumunmun, illustrated by Laura La Rosa. Again, another educational children's picture book. More than 70 years ago, the ancient legend of Gurawul the Whale was passed down to Yuan elder Uncle Max Dulumunmun Harrison by his grandfather and uncles. He promised them that one day he would travel to the southern land, Tasmania, and search for the whale dreaming of their ancestors. This exquisitely illustrated book tells the story of Uncle Max's journey to fulfill that promise and how he eventually came face to face with Gurawul. Filled with important cultural knowledge and personal stories, Uncle Max sadly died before Gurawul could be published, and his family are continuing his legacy to show how science is finally beginning to catch up with these old blackfella stories. So author Uncle Max is from the south coast of New South Wales.
So Max Dulumunmun Harrison was a deeply respected and revered elder of the Yuin Nation, which extends from Wollongong down the east coast of Australia to Gippsland and out to the southern tablelands of New South Wales. Initiated by his grandfather and uncles into the traditional ways when he was a teenager, his great gift was his ability to straddle two cultures, to communicate and share his wisdom and knowledge with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike. Born in 1936, he grew up moving with his family from camp to camp to escape the dreaded welfare. He had little formal education and taught himself to read and write. From the age of 10, his grandfather and uncles took him walking with them on country, teaching him how to learn from the land. From these masters, he learnt respect and sacredness and connection to the greatest teacher of all, nature. Over the course of his life, he worked in various occupations, including Aboriginal health services, where he worked tirelessly with those affected by alcohol and other health issues. In recent years, his charity Back to Country has helped many young men discover their culture and identity. His life's purpose has been to pass on the teaching of his elders, which he referred to as the living treasures of his life, saying that he had to give it away to keep it. Over the years, he has taught students in schools and universities and advised government ministers, as well as Australia's leading architects. His first book, My People's Dreaming, was published in 2009. In December 2021, he passed into the dreaming, leaving behind a huge legacy. An illustrator, Laura La Rosa, illustrator, New South Wales. Laura La Rosa is a freelance published writer, critic, designer, and illustrator. She holds a Bachelor of Creative Arts and Design, Graphic Design, where she received 2 Dean's Awards for academic excellence. Gurawul the Whale, an ancient story for our time, written by Yuin elder Uncle Max Dulumunmun Harrison, is the first book Laura has illustrated. She is currently working on her second illustrative title for Magabala Books. A proud Duragag and Calabrian woman, Laura lives on her ancestral lands, Darug Nagura country, the land she grew up on.
Beautiful. Number 4, and this is another fascinating book, is In My Blood It Runs by Dujuan Hoosan and illustrated by Blak Douglas. And this is the story of Dujuan Hoosan, a 10-year-old Arente and Garawa boy, a wise, funny, cheeky boy, a healer. Out bush, his healing power, Nankari, is calm and straight, but in town it's wobbly and wild like a snake. He's in trouble at school and with the police. He thinks there's something wrong with him. Dujuan's family knows what to do. They send him to live out bush, to learn the ways of the old people and the history that runs straight into all Aboriginal people, so he can be proud of himself. And illustrated by Blak Douglas, the winner of the Archibald Prize. And this was a documentary, and I watched this, and he was just an amazing kid. And yeah, he was in trouble, but his family knew what to do with him. But he was so, and he had the healing power. He, you know, he had the bush medicine spirit in him, the healing power. So yeah, it was great.
Wow. So author Dujuan Hoosan is an Arrernte and Gurawul boy who grew up between his two homelands at Sandybore Outstation near Mapatway, Alice Springs, and Spring Creek near Brolua, situated on the banks of the MacArthur River in the Gulf of Carpentaria. When he was 12, Dujuan became the youngest person to ever address the Human Rights Council at the United Nations. He asked global leaders to support Australia to raise the minimum age of criminality from 10 to 14 years in line with the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights. He also asked that the First Nations languages be taught in schools, which is a wonderful idea. Yeah. In June 2020, he was awarded the Liberty Victoria Young Voltaire Human Rights Award. That's massive. Margaret Anderson and Carol Turner are Dujuan's grandmothers. Illustrator Blak Douglas, self-practiced in painting with a style influenced by the study of graphic design and devoutly politicized per social justice.
Fantastic.
That's
so yeah, look up that story, In My Blood It Runs, and have a listen. And I know that my niece and nephew who live over in Healesville, that they learn First Nations language over there. They're learning, which is fantastic.
That's
one of
great.
the aunties of the Kulin Nation is got that happening, which is just brilliant. And so there's little bits and pieces, and I know that there's a lot of work still going on, and I think Victoria has not done very well with the age of criminal responsibility. So let's hope that we can still influence that. 10-year-olds should not be in jail.
No.
All right. End of 4 really important, amazing educational books that were part of the shortlist. I think there were a dozen on the shortlist for the Wilderness Australia Karajia Environment Awards, and all of them talk about, these particular ones talk about connection to country and how important it is that we maintain that connection and follow the lead of the stewards, of the custodians of the land who are
and the winner should be announced in October. So that is not very far away.
Not at all. So what's next, Laurie? I think
think we are talking, well, you are talking with the wonderful Vanessa Lee.
Yes, indeed. So let's jump into that conversation, because that was a lot of fun. So hello, book lovers. Absolutely delighted to have with us and homegrown but international guests. So I love it when we get to chat to people on the other side of the world, but they still talk to us with that beautiful Australian voice. So welcome, Vanessa Lee.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. And like I said, while we were warming up, I love all of the Australiana images on your screen. It's making me very homesick while I sit over here in Germany.
A very different wildlife over there for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right. So, Vanessa, I'm here on our beautiful Wurrung Wurundjeri country here in Victoria. And while you're not on a traditional Australian First Nations land, where were you born, perhaps, or where did you grow up and spend most of your time in Australia?
So I grew up in the Sutherland Shire of the Sydney region called the Shire. And that is the traditional home of the Gurawul people.
Beautiful. Yeah. And a lovely part of the world as well.
It is, and it was the inspiration for my book, so I'm sure we're going to get into that. But anybody who grew up there would already probably recognize and respond to a lot of the images and locations that I describe in the book, because I'm really tapping into my childhood memories when I was writing that book, for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Lots of beach scenes, and even just
yes.
reading about it, just made me think about the beach myself. So let's just give our listeners, I'm going to read your bio. Vanessa Lee is an author and poet who was raised in a beachside community on Australia's east coast, as we've just heard, in the Shire. She currently lives in Europe, where she is at her happiest when hiking the solitary alpine peaks of Italy, Switzerland, and Austria with her family. She visited Australia in 2022 after the COVID lockdown. It rained torrentially for a month, and there were terrible floods around Lismore and north towards Byron Bay, which sadly took away many people's livelihoods and homes. During these floods, many normal Australian citizens saved people from their homes with paddleboards and jet skis. These heroic acts inspired her to write High Rise, and her book is a tribute to these first responders. It is also a call to action, as climate change scientists and experts warn that these types of events will continue to increase unless drastic changes are made. A fairly emotional visit back to Australia, but it's seeded obviously a beautiful story which has influenced a whole lot of the next little while of your life. So tell us how that inspiration based on that tragedy then started to sort of work its way through your mind into a story.
Sure. Well, it was emotional because I had been locked out of Australia for the whole duration of COVID, and my mother was quite sick in that time, and there was a period of time where I was wondering if I had to request the government to send me back on a compassion flight. It didn't come to that, but when finally it was possible to fly back to Australia, I was so excited to come back. So that, I think, was in March 2022. So I came back, I had a whole month planned there. And I remember going down to Cronulla Beach, where I grew up in the Sutherland Shire, and just sitting there at a cafe that I love to go to called the Barefoot Cafe, which is right there on the Esplanade, and just feeling like, wow, I'm home. That's my happy place. And I had one day of that kind of weather, just what sunshine on my skin, coffee, and then the next day, that's when the bad weather rolled in. And it didn't stop. Like I said, as you read in the bio, it literally didn't stop raining for the whole month that I was there. Now, it wasn't that I was personally inconvenienced, which I felt at the time. It's more that when I was there, obviously it was all in the media. It wasn't just in the Sutherland Shire that was raining. It was raining up and down the whole eastern coast, and particularly badly around that Lismore area. And we all know now what ended up happening. They had terrible floods. People were stranded on their roofs, and we needed a lot of first responders, like in kayaks and their own tinnies and on paddleboards, to actually save a lot of lives. And I remember sitting in Australia and watching all of this playing out on the news. And I think that's when the seeds started to kind of, form in my mind. Now, when I came back then to to Germany, and people were asking me, oh, how was it? You're in Australia. You must have a wonderful time swimming and being at the beach. And I was like, well, actually, there was a major weather event while I was there. And I was, explaining to some people. And the word that kept popping into my head as I was explaining it was, it felt apocalyptic. Like I had never experienced and felt rain like that. And it must have been much, much worse up around that Lismore sort of area. And I remember saying to my husband, we went for a walk, and because he had not come with me on that trip. And I remember saying, wow, the weather I experienced, it does make me think about what the climate scientists are saying, that we are going to have a rapid escalation in not only the number of weather events that we have like that, but the severity. And I felt like I could relate to that because I'd been there for that moment in time. And then the thought just sprung a little bit further and said, well, if it's like that now, what is it going to be like in 50 years, in 60 years? Like that is in the lifetime. It could still be my lifetime, definitely the lifetime of my children. And I really felt like, I played it forward in my head, and I felt, if that's what it's like now, what is it going to be like in the medium term, let's say? And that's the premise of my book. Basically, it opens maybe 50-ish years from now. I'm not very precise in the book exactly which year the book is playing out in, but in my mind, it's maybe starting 50 to 60 years ahead of where we are now, in a moment of time where I imagine that these storms have happened so many times that people are finally saying, you know what, it's not safe to live on the eastern seaboard anymore. We do need to start thinking about relocating communities to safer, higher ground. And that's the premise of my book. So that's where it all starts. So it was truly inspired by a real weather event.
Yeah. And as you say, we need to be watching and thinking and doing something about it, because otherwise we will all be the other side of the Blue Mountains for sure, and certainly the other side of the Macedon Ranges for us. Okay, I'm going to read the blurb for your book so that people have a great sense of what we're talking about, and then we're going to get a little bit more into some of the questions. Thank you for returning those. High Rise, as you can see from the beautiful cover that is behind Vanessa at the moment, is an eye-opening book set on the Australian East Coast a few years from now. None of us know exactly when the sea level rise will start to force change, whole families moving en masse away from their coastal communities, but we know it will happen eventually. In an Australian beachside suburb, climate change can no longer be ignored. Constant storms have damaged Bombora's coastline. When rising tides force Vaga, the beloved beachfront restaurant, to finally close, it is seen as the start of an inescapable tragedy. Community rifts deepen, old friends clash, and while some flee the idyllic suburb for safer ground, many others stand firm, defying the increasingly erratic weather. Mick, a charismatic local figure, faces a family crisis as he grapples with the impending threat. A chance encounter with Renata, an old schoolmate, and her son Gurril, a local surfer, forges, an improbable alliance. As a menacing storm looms on the horizon, Mick and Gurril rail Gurril's surfer friends to form a tinny army of local first responders. But when the tempest strikes with unrelenting force, it triggers a chain of events that will alter all their lives forever. Powerfully relevant and gripping, High Rise delivers a bold and haunting vision of the not-so-distant future. The terrifying question all readers will ask, is this science fiction or history written ahead of its time? Launching on Earth Day, an annual event to demonstrate support for environmental protection, High Rise is part of a new genre of environmental storytelling or climate change fiction, cli-fi. And author Vanessa Lee wants to create awareness and action for climate change policies by engaging readers with compelling fiction rather than statistics and news reports. A little bit of mystery and suspense, a little bit of thriller, but about the climate change. So I really like the idea, and I think it's much more compelling than the statistics, that you have made it a story, that you've brought real people into it, locals, relatable events, you know, the environment, exactly where you were. So tell us why that kind of spoke to you as opposed to giving it, I guess, more of a non-fiction view.
Oh, I could never have written a non-fiction book on climate change. I think, I've simply because there are experts out there that do that. They're scientists, meteorologists, etc., and they cover that ground. What I think I do pretty well is tell human stories, and that's how I wanted to do this. And actually, the nicest compliment that I think I got, it was from one of my family members who doesn't even read that often, but read my book. And her response to me was, I loved it because I put the book down and had thought about climate change as I was reading it, but I definitely didn't feel hit over the head with it. It's not my style or my desire to go out there and lecture to people about climate change. I think there's a lot of people that feel like they're being berated and lectured, and that's not what I wanted to do. I thought to myself, maybe there's a way to kind of sneak in exactly like almost, hide the message in a story about really relatable characters. So instead of saying, oh, did you know that the predictions are that sea level rises will be by this year, tell a story that many years ahead and just explain what's happening to people. Like, they try to go to their favorite restaurant and a king tide has destroyed it the night before, or that you can't insure your house anymore because you're living too close to the coastline. Like, actually tell it in real words how it might affect you, me, our families, our children, our communities. And I think that's what I wanted to do. And it's, yeah, like I say, it's like talking about climate change almost under the cover of just a highly relatable story. And that was my desire and what I wanted to do with this book.
Fantastic. There was still a lot of research, though, involved in what you did. So tell us a little bit about the kind of rabbit holes that you dived into. Because it's so easy with research.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, you know, you write something called fiction, and there's a whole genre called science fiction where people don't really care about staying too close to the facts. Like, that's the whole point of science fiction in a lot of ways. They're imagining things that are probably not very likely to happen. But I wanted to at least, I didn't worry about sticking 100% to predictions that I could find, because I kept it quite vague about which year I was writing in, at least originally. But I didn't want it to be so outlandish that people would just close the book and say, well, that's just ridiculous. That could never happen. It could not. Sea level rises couldn't be that fast in that amount of time. So I was very careful to research what the predictions are about sea level rises in particular. And one of the things I ended up going down a rabbit hole on was one of the main tipping points for us in terms of the sea level rises is going to be glacier melt, right? So I found out and started reading about a glacier to the south of Australia called the Thwaites Glacier, which is sitting on the Antarctic ice sheet. And it's precisely the health and the degradation of that glacier that scientists are saying are going to drive how quickly sea level rises will happen. And nobody really knows. And actually what I did find out is there's a whole team of scientists trying to protect the Thwaites Glacier from melting, because once it melts, it's going to be a tipping point of a whole lot of extra water being added into the volume of water we have covering the planet, right? Because the existing water is sitting above the land mass, which is down there. So there are teams of scientists, it's actually quite fascinating, that are thinking of things like, let's cover it in an insulated blanket that will be secured to the ocean floor. I think that's a European scientist. And all of these ways that they're trying to just keep that glacier intact, because they know that once it slides off and melts into our volume of water, it's going to be a huge accelerator for our sea level rises. So this was something that once I found out about, on the one hand, I was like, okay, so it's not so outlandish what I'm, telling people my characters are going through. On the other hand, it scares me a lot. Like, I did read it and think, whoa, okay, this is quite serious. So I still follow all of those Instagram channels and check up regularly on the health of the Thwaites Glacier. And in the very last chapter of my book, there is a character who is standing at the coast after a big storm has happened, and he's looking south and he's reflecting on this particular glacier and its effect on his home, his community, etc., etc. So I don't go into huge amounts of details about it. I don't even think I name it by name in the book as a Thwaites Glacier, but it's softly referred to, let's say. So that was one of the things that I really had to do some fact checking on, just so I know that my story was staying within the realms of possibility and not turning into science fiction.
Fantastic. And given that, well, not fantastic, but good that you've done that as part of your story, because Australia is an island nation, we are so much more concerned about our coast and understand the vulnerability of it. How does it run, or how does it play in where you are in Europe, given that, yes, there's coastlines, but often, a lot of the countries are a lot more landlocked and those kind of things. Is it the same worry? Is there the same kind of urgency around climate change?
It is actually. I mean, we might not be on the coast, but we have suffered this year some pretty extreme storms, even where I'm living. And that's another thing I looked into in the book, is the nature of storms. Like, a lot of people say, when, people who are not so convinced about climate change, they say things like, oh, but we've always had storms and it's always rained. And it has, but it's the nature and the severity of these storms that actually is changing. So we hear now about things called supercell storms or rapidly intensifying storms. And we're seeing some of those in Europe where there's a lot of flooding. I mean, we might not be on a coast, but we have a lot of rivers that are running through all the different countries like the Danube and the Elbe, for example. And even today and tomorrow, it's predicted to be a huge amount of rain, and there's flood warnings all over Southeast Germany and Eastern Europe. So that's one of the things. The other thing we notice is the change of seasons. We get a lot more rain in summer than we ever used to get, and it's playing havoc with crops. Like it seems like in the last year or so, there's a lot of news around, I think this year in Germany, it was something to do with the apple production. You know, obviously Germany produces a lot of apples, but because of the bad weather and the changing seasons, apple harvests were terrible this year. And, you know, there'll be less apple pie. Like that sounds like a pretty innocent effect, but it's also affected wine. There are predictions that the wine industry is even going to have to move where they grow their grapes, because where they're currently growing, the vines are not getting the same mix of sunshine and heat. Because the more temperate weather is predicted to move more and more north of Europe, and everywhere in France, Italy, sort of down on the Med, they're starting to get very arid conditions, not so suitable for growing crops. So yeah, people talk about it definitely, but it's obviously not coastal related in most cases.
Okay. Tell me a little bit, let's switch over to you and your writing. So what was your writing routine? First of all, how long did it take you to get that first draft of High Rise out?
The first draft went really quite quickly, surprisingly, but what really took time is all the edits and the refinement. And then because I self-published the book, organizing the cover, all of those sorts of things. So I felt like I'd spat it out quite quickly, but what surprised me was the length of time in going back over. I had a lot of people edit it from both a storyline and character perspective, but then classic copywriting and, you know, all of the other bits and pieces that come along with that. But I guess because I was so, because it had been such an emotional event that caused me to write the book, I was very inspired, and so I wrote it quite quickly. Although I didn't write it like in one long line chronologically. I had a clear idea about the beginning. I had a clear idea about the end. I wasn't so sure about what was going to happen in the middle. So I actually wrote the beginning, then wrote the end, and then what took time was writing the middle to link those two pieces together. So maybe it's called like a bookend approach. I'm not really sure if that has a formal name, but that's what worked for me, and that's how I did it.
Fantastic. And the choice to self-publish, tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, you know, I would have been delighted to go through a traditional publisher, but I think at the time that I was sending the pitch around, because this is a very special genre and a new genre, climate fiction, I don't know if a lot of traditional publishing houses are there yet in wanting or knowing if the market really wants that. So I think that was something that was getting in the way. Also, I'm an incredibly impatient person. So at some point, I just thought, you know what, I believe in this story. I think it's got an important message. I want it out there. And all of the tools are available to do it yourself. So I just did it. That maybe speaks more to my impatience than anything else.
No, I'm with you on that one. It's like, I can't wait 2 years to get a book out. Let's just learn how to do it and do it ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the experience of self-publishing, would you go that route again immediately for the next book, or would you try and pitch to a traditional publisher?
Yeah, I would try to pitch to a traditional publisher with a more traditional genre. And then I would perhaps go back to the climate aspect. So the next book that I plan to write will be, again, based on my experiences, because I need to tap into my own lived experience to write. That's something I know about myself. It gives you this richness in your writing that people can just sense, because it's you know, it's your experience feeding the narrative. So I will write a book that will be based on a woman who moves from Australia to Germany with two young children. So that will be the premise, the beginning of it, but then it's going to turn into a, and I'll have to make this bit up. It'll turn more into a thriller and a bit of a drama. I already have it mapped out in my head. So that will be what I do next. And I will definitely look for a publisher for that one.
Fantastic.
It's not easy though, I have to say. Any writer will tell you that this is probably the most depressing part of writing is like you write your story, you love it so much, you think it has worth and merit, and then you have to go and sell it. And that, it can be very discouraging. And we all see these, we see these amazing stories of, quite obscure authors suddenly being plucked out of obscurity and winning the Miles Franklin, and then they just explode. But I'm like, that is one in thousands and thousands and thousands case.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of really good writers out there that are just very quietly just writing their stuff and putting it out there. And
yes. And even those people that seem to be plucked from obscurity have generally been writing all their lives, or they've had lots of stories rejected, and as you say, then they just hit the right note at the right time and away they go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So at your early writing, what kind of writing were you doing before High Rise?
So I knew, or when I was young, when you're at school, like you get a lot of feedback from people around you, especially from your teachers, what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I just remember being told, or the moments in my schooling life where I was really praised and given great feedback was definitely from my writing. I wasn't, I was okay at all the other subjects, but there were a couple of memories that I have of teachers handing back work and saying, that was really good, Vanessa, and so I knew from a young age, like, oh, maybe this is my skill. Maybe this is the thing that I do, really, really well. So I've always loved to write. But I never, and I would try to write, books. I would start the first chapter, but because I never really, I think, had that emotional connection like I did with High Rise, and that felt experience of wanting to explain to people why it unsettled me so much to be in Australia and live through that weather event. It just never really, I never saw it through. So this was the first time with High Rise that it was very, very easy to spit out a whole book. It had felt like effort before that. But I've always written, and I've also dabbled in poetry a little. I mean, I love it. I lose myself in writing. I can write for 4 hours without stopping for a toilet break and just sit up and go, what, where am I?
Just get in the flow. Yes, absolutely.
And when it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes writing is also like, I've really got to just write a paragraph that links those two things together. But that feeling of being in the flow is just such a great feeling that, I'm quite hooked on it, actually. Yeah. And I had that flow feeling a lot with writing High Rise.
It was obviously the story that was meant to be.
Yeah. It's funny. It sounds corny, but some people, I think, describe the process as feeling like the story's coming through you.
Yes.
And there were moments where it really did feel like that. Like, oh, where did that idea come from? And I'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden I'd have an image of, I almost play it in my head like a movie before I write it. So I've got it going in my head, and I'm seeing the characters, and I know how they're dressed, and I even know what their, how deep is their voice and what's their hair like. Like I see it very, very visually in my own mind, and then I'm putting that down on paper. So it's a very visual thing for me first, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic. And talking about visuals, the beautiful cover of your book, tell us a little bit about where that came from.
Sure. I'm just leaning over so people can maybe see it in my backdrop. So, I mean, obviously, my book is about sea level rises and a storm that hits a beach. So I literally just reached out to a friend of mine, Shannon. She's a graphic designer, a very good friend of mine in Sydney, and I gave her my ideas. I have a poster in my office in Munich, and I've had it for a very long time. Those really classic Japanese woodblock tsunami posters.
Yes, with the beautiful curls on the end of the waves. Yeah.
So I've always had something like that, and I sort of took a picture of that, and I said, can you just stylize this a little bit, make it look a little bit more modern and fresh? And And that's what she came up with, and I love it. I think the cover's really beautiful. I love that it's sort of soft and in a softer color palette. It's not dark, or I don't want to terrify people with the message of my book. Like, I want to seduce them with a beautiful summer read, with just a sprinkling of climate change thought in there. And
Yeah,
that's what the cover needed to portray as well. Like, soft, gentle, draw you in.
and then let's smash you with the wave. I just had the images of sitting on the beach, and when was it? It was the shark one. What's that terrible shark movie that then they went on to?
Jaws.
Jaws. Just had a mental blank. I think sitting on the beach and then Jaws. Do. So you just want to sneak up on them with a little bit of the Cli-Fi story. Very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit of your writing routine. It sounds like you're kind of a little bit of a pantser, but there's a little bit of a, first and last, and that you let those characters tell their own story. What's the most useful writing advice that you've ever been given?
It was not to be too perfectionistic. So I am a perfectionist by nature, and that doesn't work if you're just working on drafts of a novel, right? So if you're the sort of person like I was for a while, I would be writing, and if I didn't like a sentence, I would like hang there for a long time, like, oh, I've got to fix this sentence, da, da, da. There's a moment in writing where you just actually have to try to go through a bit faster, like get the principles down in blocks, and then you can go back and you can refine. And if you know, for example, there's going to be some dramatic event, but my brain's not there yet, I don't know all the details of that, don't feel like you have to stop chronologically and figure that out. You can just pause it. You can just put in your draft, and something dramatic happens here, ... and then move on to the bit you want to write, which is what I ended up doing, the beginning, the end, and then I went back and did the middle and the climax, let's say. I was a bit scared of the climax because I knew it had to be really riveting, and I would have to research quite a lot to describe the weather event that happens in my book. I was a bit scared of that, but if I had hung there and just stopped at that point and said, I don't want to write this, I'm not ready to write this, I could have potentially just stopped writing the book. But when somebody said to me, you can just write there, Vanessa, and the storm happens here, X, and then move on, it keeps the momentum going. And so that's what I did, and that really worked for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Although I have done that on occasion and then said, damn you, past Veronica, what the hell were you thinking of writing that as future Veronica? Had to have go back and have another go. But it works. Yeah. It does. As you say, sometimes you've got to get that flow, get the basics of the story, the bones out, and you can put the flesh on it a little bit later. And the climax has to be climactic, of course. All right. So we've looked at the cover. We've talked about your writing advice. Where do you write? What's your sort of favourite time of the day or place?
So I'm much better in the mornings, I've discovered. So I love to get up, make a cup of tea, and the first couple of hours of the day is when I'm feeling the most probably switched on and in the flow. So a lot of my writing happened in the morning, and that was really useful for me because I work for a company where a lot of my counterparts sit in the United States, and so my real work day doesn't really ramp up until around lunchtime. So it meant that I could structure my days all of last year when I was writing, that I could take the morning hours for myself and then work sort of later in the day, and that worked really, really well. But in terms of where I write, if I'm not at home, like I always write on a laptop. So it could be sometimes I'm sitting in bed because I dreamt a part of my book that I quickly want to just grab on the laptop and I'm going to put that in. Sometimes it's downstairs. I've taken my laptop on weekends away and holidays because, that I enjoy when I've got those longer periods of time to go a bit deeper, to be able to spend some more focused time writing. I've also been known to quickly, because I'm someone who gets like these, ideas can drop into my head very, very quickly, and then I want to capture it. So sometimes I've been doing something completely different and just grabbed my iPhone and just quickly typed some stuff into the iNotes app because I don't want to lose what I've just thought. So I've even written a poem on my iPhone sitting in a sauna because that's where that's where the idea actually like hit me and I didn't want to lose it. So I'm pretty flexible. I scribble on paper.
Anytime, anywhere. It
I'm
sounds like
anywhere.
noisy or quiet, doesn't matter, just whenever the inspiration hits you. Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
Okay. So time relaxing, and you've got your mystery thriller coming up, or a little bit of perhaps a family saga part of there, and you've just written a cli-fi. What is it that you read for relaxation yourself? What are your favorite kind of genres?
I mean, quite honestly, I read fiction. So I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I read essays and things like that online, but for books, I don't. I need to lose myself in stories about people. Fiction is really what I love. So
Escape.
I was just on summer holidays, so I read 3 books actually, and they were all great. But the one that I really loved was by Elena Ferrante. She's the Italian writer who wrote the My Brilliant Friend series. I don't know if you've heard of it, but she's written a
No.
book, a much shorter book called The Days of Abandonment. So she comes from Naples. I think she was writing like a few decades ago, but I absolutely adore her writing. And this book, The Days of Abandonment, really, really moved me. It was about a woman whose husband leaves her, and you go into her internal world and you're basically listening to her inner voice, which, as most of us know, especially as women, our inner voices can be very, very mean. And so she's grappling with her inner voice, like, how is she going to deal with this abandonment? And yeah, I just found it incredibly moving and beautifully written. So it's a shorter book, and that's the one that really stood out to me recently.
Fantastic. When people find their voice, as it sounds like you have found your voice in High Rise, then it is compelling, isn't it? Because we find it relatable, even if it's not necessarily about things and scenarios that we might have been involved in, but we can hear that person's voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Your advice for young writers, or emerging writers, what would you suggest to them?
What worked for me when I was young was when I was living in Sydney, there was this, I don't know if it still exists, but it was called the Bondi Junction or the Bondi Writers Group. I would really suggest find a group, go to a group where you can write, get feedback from other people, get feedback from whoever's running the course. Hopefully they're also an established writer. I actually did a course with, do you remember Puberty Blues, which funnily enough, written based in the Shire.
Yes.
And it was written by Kathy Lett and Gabrielle Carey. Sadly, Gabrielle Carey has passed, but she used to run a writing course at the UTS in Sydney, and I did that course. And I remember that was pivotal for me in trusting that I could be a writer, because I was in a room of like 15 other people. We would write things, we'd read it out, we would get critique. I got Gabrielle's critique on my work as well. And that was really, I think I needed that to really believe that I can be a writer too, So I would definitely suggest, like, don't just sit in your room and write alone. Find other passionate writers, give them feedback, accept their feedback, do all the great exercises. Like sometimes, writing is like a muscle, and you just have to train yourself to, with that muscle. And if you go to courses like that, you'll get exercises like, prompts. Imagine, I don't know, I'm just thinking out of, imagine your fridge fell on your head. What do you like that? That's a stupid example, but quick prompts that you just have to quickly write about is really, really important to train that. But I think more than anything, just network with other people who are passionate about writing. Go to, join a book club, learn how people respond to narratives, what they love about it, what they don't love about it. And you'll realize it's also healthy. You realize that it's such a personal thing. Some people love, like 80% of people can love the latest Tim Winton, and there's going to be like 10% or 15% who are indifferent and 5 that hate it. And it's important to know that, because when you put your baby out into the world, you can't expect everybody to love it, and you have to be strong enough and resilient enough that some people are just not going to get it. They might even hate it. But when you've sat through enough discussions about other books, you realize that that's just a normal, natural thing. That's just human nature. We don't all love the same thing. Thank God. Imagine the world if we all just loved the same thing.
Really, really boring.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think they are certain things that I would suggest. And also I would suggest travel and observe, like just observe the diversity of life on the planet. Like I've traveled a lot in my life. I started when I was in my 20s backpacking in Asia, and like now I've been living over in Europe for 16 years, and I've traveled a lot within Europe. And I do city trips, but I also, like you said in the intro, I go up into the mountains, and I have a lot of time alone up in places where you're switched off with no Wi-Fi. It does give your brain different modes, which are good for me. It makes me more creative when I have those moments. So yeah, join a book club, join a writing club, and travel. They would be my 3 pieces of advice. And observe. So travel and observe. Don't just travel and drink.
Yeah.
What I did in my 20s, but travel and observe, like, how do people live? How are they different from me? Things will stand out to you, and just quirky details that you'll be surprised 10 years from now, you could be writing a book and then a little detail springs in from a time you were on the subway in New York about the way someone was dressed or the way they spoke or acted. So it's all about getting that fodder, right?
Absolutely, yes. Feed the muse.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where can people find you online, Vanessa? Where's the best spot to either purchase your book, besides, of course, on Australian Book Lovers website? Where can they find or follow you?
So to find my book, or to even read more about my book, I'm on Goodreads, so you can read more there, and there's a few reviews. You can buy it over any Amazon, either paperback. It's internationally available. I think it's also, through outlets like Big W. If you go in and request that they'll order it, they can get it in for you. It's probably not stocked on the shelves because I'm a new writer, but I think Amazon is the best bet. You can get it on your Kindle, or you can get the paperback copy. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, the handle is Vanessa_Lee_writes. And I post, a bit of poetry, a bit about my book, but also some of the interesting things about climate change that I've found and still follow. So if you're interested in that topic as well, I'm not there a lot. I don't call myself a content creator. I'm not doing it daily, but yeah, I try to keep that handle going.
It's very hard these days with so many different platforms and new ones coming on the market every day. So yeah, we try and keep things going on a few, but that's about all we have. So right. Vanessa Lee, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you've got your day ahead of you as I'm sliding quietly into the weekend, Friday evening here in Victoria. So thanks for your time. Good luck with High Rise. I hope the sales continue to share this fabulous story, and we're looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. And I loved, like I said, seeing all your Australian animals there on your screen. It's made me jealous that you're sliding into spring now and we're facing our autumn is coming. So thank you. I enjoyed the discussion.
Lovely. Okay. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to Vanessa Lee. What a great chat. And,
Absolutely.
Good on her for getting up early in the morning and chatting to me. So climate fiction, close to science, the Thwaites Glacier. Actually, I was going to do a little bit more research on the Thwaites Glacier because Antarctica is so close. And
rolling down the rabbit hole.
Yes, that's a place I would really, really love to go.
Oh, really?
My friend's parents did a flyover. Even that, I think, would be just amazing, just truly amazing. And I've walked on glaciers in New Zealand, the Fox Glacier, which was fantastic, and we landed on a plane and did some skiing down and all that kind of thing. So that was pretty cool. Not the Fox Glacier, on the other one, the Tasman. But anyway, again, just got to be so careful. And I think that gives you the power of the environment. Yeah. And the fact that, we talked about what is it, the John's word?
Yes.
That it could happen at any moment.
Yeah, that fear. It's like, absolutely.
Nature describes to wipe us out.
Craxis,
yes,
that's it. Yeah.
If nature goes, you know what, we're done.
Yeah. And I tell you, with all the crazy weather, you feel like that sometimes, where you just think, yep, righto, yep, I get your point.
Yep, absolutely.
But the melting of glaciers does kind of terrify me a little bit. There was one of the cartoons that I watched does a great, the Keanu Reeves, the bus movie with
Sandra Bullock.
Yeah,
Speed.
with Sandra Bullock. Yeah, Speed. That's it. They did a great takeoff of what it would be if it was a glacier melting. It's moving at 5 centimeters every year. It was such a funny moment, but it again, it's that reminder of just how important these glaciers are. So no,
Yeah.
that was a great chat that you had, and I loved when Vanessa was describing that feeling of the story flowing through you when you really get into that. I couldn't do a 4-hour stint of writing, but when you really get into that flow and you feel like it's being written by something else, or you're just that conduit for putting the words down. So yeah, that was fantastic. And I loved her writer's advice, which I've actually got a quote along those lines, with the not being a perfectionist and using your drafts as building blocks to refine it as you go through, because I'm certainly being a pantser, I have many drafts, and each draft it just gets that little bit tighter, a little bit more refined, a little bit better. Yeah, so that was great listening to her chat.
Real people, relatable events to give the message about something that is incredibly important. But if we can relate to it, and I've got the muse thing as well. See it right.
And of course making it human, which I think that is. I get, as a sci-fi writer, I get lost in the plot. I get lost in the giant worlds and the what ifs and all those sorts of bits and pieces. But it's when I'm writing that I have to remember that it is from the character's eyes, and that is their story that they're telling, and everything else going on is going on, but it's still coming through their lens, which I think makes it more connectable, and that you can relate a little bit more to people. So that's where I've caught myself. Do you know, that's where I've caught myself with a writer's block, because I was so focused on the plot that my character wasn't driving the story, and I just couldn't figure out where my chapter was going, and I was just blocked, and it took me a month or two. And listening to some inspirational authors talking about going through that writer's blockage, that I really looked at it and went, oh, hang on. And I actually went back a couple of chapters, picked back up with my character, and went in her direction rather than the plot I wanted it to go in, and then it all started flowing again. So it's
let her tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a good learning at the time, and it certainly, I got past that blockage very quickly once I did that and actually went back to her story. So yeah, great advice.
And what I love about that also is that they just take you in odd directions sometimes. You go, oh, I'm typing, but I didn't see that coming.
No, exactly. I'm like, oh, that character's just had a great epiphany. I was not expecting that.
Yes, indeed. Beautiful. So join a book club, join a writing club, and travel and observe. You know, I think that writers are great people watchers. We do have a lot of that kind of observational excellence. But thank you to Vanessa Lee with her book High Rise. So and keep a lookout for her next book, which is going to be a little bit different, which is good.
Yes, love it. So speaking of quotes.
Speaking of quotes.
So I've got one
exactly. Well, I scroll down to my quote.
Okay. Well, I've got one from Octavia E. Butler. You don't start out writing good stuff. You start out writing crap and thinking it's good stuff. And then gradually you get better at it. That's why I say one of the most valuable traits is persistence. So beautiful. I thought that was very fitting with Vanessa's chat today, and also with you and I with our stories. It's you know what? It starts off as crap. I'm happy I'll own that.
Oh yeah. Just kind of verbal diarrhea, let's be honest. But there we go. All right.
Stays crap for a very long time.
Yes. Well, I won't tell you what draft I'm up to. Okay, I've got one from the fabulous Ray Bradbury. Living at risk is jumping off the cliff and building your wings on the way down.
That terrifies me. I'm like, no, let's not build wings on the way down. That's too late by that point.
So that is living at risk. Wow. Yeah,
that's pantsing. That's what that is. That is riding as a pantser. We don't know what we're doing.
Yes. One of my favorite Ray Bradbury's, of course, is Fahrenheit 451, which is the temperature that books burn at. And if people don't know, it's a story when they were burning books, but people chose to read a book and remember every word of it so that they were in fact the living book, which is fantastic. So, a little bit Big Brotherish, but great. Good story.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I think we might be At the
I
end,
think
are
we
we?
are. I
Are we
think
for
that is the
today?
end of our
Oh my
six
goodness.
score episode.
Fantastic. And of course, you can always find us on Twitter, Australian Books, Instagram, Threads, Australian Book Lovers, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify. What am I missing? There's something
No,
else.
I think
No,
you've
that's
got,
pretty
yeah, no,
close.
you've got everything, which is fantastic. And if you'd love to support us and,
Mm.
help us cover the costs of our platform, which we're
Yes.
still a little way from, please feel free to subscribe via the Buzzsprout, and that is much appreciated. So
Agree.
that will just help it keep us going. And we have some great writers' rooms planned in the near future. We're not going to let you know until we have them confirmed in writing. We'll continue to have
Yes.
some great writers. And if I can get my act together, I have again such a pile of fabulous books to give away.
I was just going to ask. So yes, there must be a giant pile there to give away. So subscribe, sign up for the newsletter, just
Yes.
jump on board, and
Yep.
we get some great books. Come on, people.
We certainly do, and really books for all genres. So I've got some from Spinifex Press, some from Text Publishing,
Oh, cool.
some from our fabulous friends at Transit Lounge, and a few other different bodies there. So yeah, please. And if you are an author, please jump on, and
Yes.
even it's particularly
It's free.
if you've got
It's free.
your first or
Pop your
second
books
book
up.
with us, don't forget to give us your third and fourth books, so that people can see all of that. And we're hoping to gradually get the website updated so that we can get author pages and you can see everybody's books all together. So we're working on that, which is good. And you'll see some of our pages have changed. And Laurie and I have just been doing some B-roll with Angus Strachan Productions today to put on the video for the
we have
website.
The amazing little podcast cartoony images that your incredible daughter put together for us. There's just
which is fantastic. From
things
and also that was Steve from Darren's friend from SA. So brilliant. Lots of people contributing time and effort to celebrate and support Australian authors. So, and we even I don't know what we're doing, but we're getting a lot of inquiries from publishers around the world, and I have to say, no, I'm really sorry.
Oh, wow.
We can only just do authors,
Aussie books.
Australian. I would really love to add the Kiwis, the New Zealand authors. So we might have to.
We could have a Kiwi shout out. That'd be fun. We could definitely have a Kiwi shout out, because they're our bros over the ditch.
Across the ditch, indeed they are. So we might have to see if I can expand that. I just need to, win Tats Lotto, and then that would be fantastic. We could do that.
Yeah. Money would be good. Buy our books. Buy our books, people. Actually, one thing I will shout out with, one last one, is reviews. If you support indie authors, not me. If you want to do a review of one of my books, I would be appreciative. But any Aussie writer, any indie writer, anywhere in the world, really, it's a shout out to everyone. If you like a book, tell someone. If you like an author, tell someone. You don't have to write the perfect school-generated, please not AI-generated, book review. It can be one line. It can be, this was fabbo, I had a great time, I read it on holidays. Like, it does not, these reviews are life's blood for authors, because we, it just gets word out to other people. And I mean, we were talking earlier about book recommendations just between the two of us, and it'll encourage people to go out and read a book. So do it. Tell people.
Give them some stars, tell a friend, or write a few words. That is absolutely fantastic. And
they make great Christmas presents, because they're really easy to wrap. Do it.
Make the classic parcel shape, don't they? So
start now. Perfect. Do it now. It's nearly the end of September. We're coming into October. Books are the best presents.
They are. Get over to the Australian Book Lovers website, australianbooklovers.com, and scroll through all those beautiful, and you'll see some of the pages have changed. Some of them we're getting there. So please, but click on those books and buy an Aussie authored book. Absolutely. Thanks, Laurie, for another fun session. And we've just got one more thing to say.
We do. So you kick us off this time, because you always get me on this.
Okay, it's time to remember that we need to read more Aussie books. Thanks, everybody, and bye.
Let's meet again when magic happens.